Hello everyone and welcome to an incredible game from round 2 of this year's European Team Championship. I know everyone is now obsessed with Hikaru Flinging as king and what it means and what it doesn't mean and was it okay or was it, out of the line. But here, as usual, we're just gonna stick to chess as that is what we enjoy and what this channel is about. So yeah, let's check it out. It is the match Greece versus Israel. Board 1 is NikolasTheodorou versus Maxim Rodshtein. It's a beautiful game. Let's dive straight into it. Nikolas with white opens with pawn to d4. We have pawn to d5, pawn to c4, pawn to c6, and knight to f3. We have knight to f6, knight to c3, and pawn to e6. So the semi-Slav defense is on the board. We have c captures on d5, e captures, and bishop to f4. We have bishop to f5, pawn to e3, and knight b to d7. Queen to b6 also very popular here. Sometimes bishop to d6 right away, but okay, knight b to d7. We have pawn to h3, bishop to e7, and pawn to g4. This is the same move Magnus Carlsen played against Yanni Pomnishi in the Sinquefield Cup of 2022. Magnus won that game very nicely, but Nepo went bishop to e4. Here we have bishop to g6, knight to h4, and there are a couple of games in the database. For example, knight to f8 is a known move. There's a game where bishop to e4 was played. Also, knight to e4 is known. But here we have queen to b6, and it is now, as of move 10, that we have a completely new game. Okay, we have queen to b3. Nikolas offers a queen trade. He wants the capture to occur on b3 so he can open up the a file. And of course, Maxim wants that as well. We have castles kingside, knight captures on g6. We have h captures on g6 and the bishop to e2. Queen captures on b3 and a captures on b3. This opens up the a file for Nikolas's rook. And the a7 pawn could be a little bit vulnerable. So you have to decide whether you want to play a6, a5, maybe just keep the pawn on a7, keep the rook on a8. For the moment, we have rook f to e8 and pawn to h4. We have knight to f8, going for that e6 square to put pressure on the bishop. Pawn to g5, chases away the knight, knight to h5, and the bishop to h2. So, okay, you could say the knight has been activated, but even though, sometimes they say a knight on the rim is grim or dim, or, however you want to rhyme it, but there are lines where it's actually okay to have a knight on the rim. Here, you can see that it will be somewhat difficult to get that knight back into the game. But okay, we have bishop to h2, pawn to f6, trying to open up the position right away, and rook to g1. This makes sure that the knight remains on h5, so white is never interested in capturing that knight, as that knight is stuck there for maybe not the rest of the game, but definitely for the moment. King to f7. You could also trade, but doesn't really do all that much. We have king to f7, king to d2, and knight to e6. We have bishop to d3, pawn to f5. Now, you're putting pressure on the g6 pawn, so if the capture ever happens on f6, that could be a problem. So you have to choose, between the lesser evil. So pawn to f5, bishop to e5, as the square was left behind, and now pawn to a6. So he wants to get the rook into the game, so he has to defend the pawn. We have king to c2 by Nikolas, rook a to d8, and the bishop to e2. We have pawn to c5, pressuring the d4 pawn, and here bishop to f3. I think as Maxim is already very low on time, and you guys would of course know that if I actually allowed the clock times to be seen, which I will do momentarily. Sorry about that, I didn't have the clock times in the previous video, so sometimes I don't pick up on it right away. But yeah, there we go. So it's 32 minutes versus 13 minutes, and you should not go bishop to f3 right away. You should go rook a to d1. And the point is that the d5 pawn cannot be saved, but only if you use this move order. And it doesn't matter what black plays. Now, if you play captures, then you can capture with the rook, and the pawn cannot be defended. So not the rook, you will capture with the bishop, and the pawn cannot be defended. Doesn't really matter what you play. If you challenge the bishop, you will just capture, and again, d5 cannot be defended. Even if you capture on d4, then rook captures on d4, and you will capture at your earliest convenience, you can even go bishop to f3 if you want to capture that way. So that would be the way to go. But after bishop to f3, this allows Maxim to get back into the game. As he now plays c captures on d4, you don't have a rook on d1. We have knight captures on d5, d captures on e3, and f captures on e3. We have bishop to d6, bishop captures, rook captures, and now rook a to d1. But now you have knight to c5, and it's not as great as the line that we've shown. But knight to c5 is a mistake, so Nikolas has a chance to get some of that advantage back. Here, you should just double up, and that's it. Now the game just continues. However, after knight to c5, there is a move that really poses some problems for black. What would you play here as white? So it's not really a pause the video moment because you guys know as soon as I ask the question, if b4 is possible, then b4 is the strongest move, and this is no exception. b4 was played; it is by far the best move. And now look at the problem here. The knight was to be remaneuvered via the c5 square to the e4 square. Okay, that's no problem. Knight e4. Knight to c3, and now what do you play? Okay, here Maxim trades rooks. We have captures, and the question is what to play now. If you trade knights, let's say you trade knights, captures, you improve white's pawn structure. And then, of course, the main idea is rook d7, so you have to stop that. Then rook d6. And, okay, you're attacking b7, you're going to play rook b6, you're going to pick up the pawn, then you're going to pick up the a6 pawn, and then the passed b pawn will just win the game. So it's that simple. The best move for black, recommended by the engine, is rook e7, but even that is just not enough, because you're going to play bishop captures on e4, and after f captures, you're just going to play rook g1, and the knight remains on h5 for the rest of the game. You can't go to g3, can't go to f4, can't go to f6, and cannot go to g7, and the rook here is stuck guarding the e4 pawn, so you really can't move anything, and that white king will just enter the game, and, you know, maybe you can hold, but, you know, in a practical game with 3 minutes on the clock, it's just not happening. So Maxim tried knight h to g3, saying, okay, if you capture, I'm going to capture with my knight. But now rook to d7 check. We have rook e7, rook captures, and now king to d3. Here, again, Nikolas makes a little bit of an imprecision. The way to play this is knight d5. And it just puts black in zugzwang. That's all there is to it. King e6, knight f4, and now you're putting pressure on the g6 pawn. You have to defend with king to f7, and now king d3, and there's nothing you can do here. If this knight moves, then you capture and pick up the pawn. If this knight moves, well, then you lose control over the d6 square, and you can just march that king up the board. Also, you can enter via the c5 square and just pick up all of the pawns. The king, if the king moves, you capture on g6, so this is just a dead loss for black. But okay, king to d3, black's position is still very, very difficult to play, and very little time on the clock. Knight captures on c3, b captures, and pawn to b6. Here, Maxim says, all right, your position is better, but I have counterplay now. I'm going to play a5 and create a passed pawn of my own. Pawn to c4, we have king to d6 and bishop to d5, followed by king to e5. Here, this pawn to a5 move was kind of the last moment where black could remain in the game, but after king to e5, the position is now lost. We have bishop to bishop to f7 also can be played. Bishop to b7 was played in the game. Pawn to a5, and now what would you play here? Only one move is winning, and now you're going to have to play a series of only moves in order to win this game. And the way to do that is to play pawn to c5. And it doesn't matter what you do. If b captures on c5, then you have a passed a pawn, easily winning. And if a captures on b4, which was played in the game, then c captures on b6. Again, you have a passed b pawn and a completely winning endgame. King to d6, we have bishop to d5. Another beautiful move. Of course, if the bishop is captured, then the pawn is unstoppable. So you're just moving it with tempo, and also you control b3. It's just a beautiful central square for the bishop. We have knight to f1. And now bishop to g2. You can get to an even better square with tempo. So attacking the knight, knight to h2, and king to c4. You're going after the pawn, knight to g4, king captures on b4, and knight captures on e3. But now look at this, king b5. You don't need the bishop. If the bishop is captured, king a6, and the pawn is again unstoppable. So after king b5, knight to g4, we have bishop to c6, knight to e5 attacking the bishop, and bishop to e8. And again, the bishop cannot be opposed. You go after the bishop, the pawn, queens. That's as simple as that. So pawn to f4, Maxim starts advancing his pass pawn. And now, again, only one winning move. What do you play here? Of course, king a6. No doubt you found it. You guys are amazing endgame players. If you just push the pawn, then king to c7, and you stop the pawn. But after king a6, there's no stopping that pawn. So knight to d3, b7, knight c5 check, and it's still very, very intense. King a7, knight captures, king captures, and now look at this, pawn to f3. So what is happening now? Can you win? Can you still win this with white? Yes, you can. But you have to play bishop captures on g6, and now after king e5, pawn to h5, and he was in this position on move 53 that Maxim Rodshtein resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Point is that, look at this, if you play pawn to f5, bishop d3, stops the promotion, king d4, bishop f1, king e5, and now bishop h3. You cut off the black king, and now again the black king is in zugzwang. You cannot approach the pawns. If you give up the pawn to play king f5, it doesn't matter. Pawn to g6. You have to play like this, otherwise you're not winning. And now everything wins. Just bishop e2, you defend your pawn, march your king over, and win the game easily. So yeah, beautifully played by Nikolas, who is now 2652, closing in on that 2700. And here are the standings after 2 rounds have been played. 5 teams on 100%. That's Romania, Greece, Slovenia, Serbia, and France. So we'll see what happens in round 3, but definitely a nice start for Nikolas and his Greece team. So that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Robert Arathun, Rokaho, John Anderson, Ulrichtini, and Gerard St. Pierre for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.